I'll hold the next session. My name is Aksel Jarlbäck. I'm head of sales for Novacura. So I do a bit of selling activities. I do present stuff at these kind of conferences. But I will also do some sharing of ideas or interesting solutions that I've come across my 24 years of doing IFS consulting and flow development. So this title of this session is Customer Cases and Use Cases. And in the beginning, you know that Łukasz and Johan, they talked about that we are going into more of industry solutions. We see an opportunity to see that there are things missing that are important for customers in certain industries. We've had the opportunity to work with ERPs and use those to build. In the early days, we built just for those ERPs. We built them as custom apps, and then we extended that going further with our marketplace, our standard apps. What we do see now in the future, if this works, or if it doesn't work, I'll just click on it. If it doesn't work like that, then I'm going to use the manual old-fashioned key. That doesn't work either. So if that doesn't work, I'll restart the presentation. Let's see if it works now. Yeah. That we had the marketplace app that extended the functionality, that gave you the ability to create or leverage what we've actually created before in our factory, our business app development laboratory. What I'm going to talk about now is more about these kind of industry solutions that extend the functionality of the ERP. And this is what we've seen in different areas, such as mining area, that we extended the functionality of the ERP. We see that in large companies that want to be able to use other functionalities, such as a more advanced procurement process that the ERP caters for. So with this said, we've added capabilities in more than just one area. There are examples for manufacturing customers where we talk about being able to extend the functionality with lightweight MES systems, being able to connect that to the machine, collect data, doing automatic reporting. We also see it in logistics, where I think that Łukasz will share some examples in how you can manage returnable packaging material. So there's a lot of these areas where we see benefits of actually using a local platform to create these solutions. And I'm going to give you some more examples in this area, and specifically going to talk about procurement. And why is procurement? Well, it's kind of thing where I started my career in the early days at a company called Specma. I was the procurement manager for that company, managed a global procurement budget of 600 million. And at that time, we didn't have a lot of tools for us to help out in the procurement area, the process. There was a lot of manual areas. So I'm going to focus a lot on the procurement area. Procurement is not a process that just takes place inside a singular department. It's actually something that is a collaborative process that takes place across multiple departments. There are stakeholders inside the company, such as the finance department. There are procurement department. There's internal people that actually request to buy things. And then, of course, there's the suppliers, engineering department, quality department. All of these people need to collaborate. And I'm going to share some of the examples that actually shows you how you can tie these loose ends together. And the first example is in the area of being able to get a supplier in your organization. Usually you have people that want to buy things in your company. They request a new supplier. We need to add that supplier because I want to buy that stuff from them. There's a new nice company called Novacura. I want to buy their software, for example, just to take one example. And typically, that turns into a process where you need to manage that internally with a request. Usually that's like a Word form, it's like going to be Excel file, or just an email chain. And then it goes over to procurement. They say, yeah, we'll probably register it, and then it's in the system. Finance sets up a supplier, but maybe you already have that supplier in your system. So what we propose is more of a controlled way of managing this process, with a proper supplier onboarding process, which takes all the steps, collaborates with the supplier, but also brings all the information into one singular process that is managed inside Novacura. And of course, this can be extended going further. We talk about purchase requisition, approving POs, etc., purchase requisitions. These are just processes that we have already. We also have additional processes for actually managing RFQs, being able to collaborate with the suppliers in the RFQ process. Then turning that into processes where you send out the PO, set up contracts, you even talk about procurement plans, contract management, and managing that investment plan. Maybe it's assets that you need to be able to tie this into. This is where we are proposing a solution we have that's called an e-tender management. This is more of a complex procurement process, maybe not for just a simple manufacturing process, but if you have a large-scale company that has project-based procurement where it actually ties into more of an investment plan, usually these are tender processes that you need to manage in some way. Now, secondly, we can go further on and talk about the whole chain of procurement where you send out the POs to the supplier, they can confirm the delivery, they can even share the forecast with that to the suppliers, and they can confirm, yes, we will be able to manage that forecast, we'll be able to produce those items. That can also even incorporate the early stages of more simplified RFQ process. And this is what we talk about as a supplier portal solution. All of these solutions that we talk about here are existing solutions that we've had, delivered many times over time. And then what we're doing now is we're kind of pre-packing these as template solutions that you can tailor with Novacura Flow. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about these specific solutions. And the first is a supplier onboarding process where you start off with someone requesting or an external supplier requesting to be a supplier. And it's a process divided by typical three stages. There's a request form where you can guide either your employees through a series of steps requesting information, or you can even send it out to a supplier requesting to be a supplier. It's a simple web app. They're guided through a series of steps requesting information about that. And then once that is done, it turns into a request, and that is then validated in a portal solution where we have, the procurement department or the supply chain department collaborating about validating the information. Is this a supplier that we want to have in our organization? And then if they approve, the last step is to be able to kind of say, yes, we want to be able to set this up as a supplier organization. There's a simple solution, just an approval step, which in the end creates a supplier in the backend ERP, sets up the necessary, if you want to have like the supplier portal solution, sends out that information to that supplier about this is the login to the portal, this is where you will get your request, RFQs, and this is also where you would get your POs and be able to confirm those. Simple guided process. Now, the specifics of this process, we can go into more details, but it's like a swim lane where you talk about submitting the request. There's a process where you can iterate through getting more information. Sometimes the quality department needs to be involved, being able to request information about certificates. Maybe the supplier needs to perform a supplier evaluation, like a criteria that they follow through to be able to be a supplier. Once that is done, the whole information set goes over to approval step, which can be a mobile app or it can be just a web app that the manager says, yes, I approve this supplier. And then it creates that supplier in the backend ERP and sets it up in the portal solution. And roughly how it looks is like this. This is just a web app requesting that supplier to be onboarded. Oops. Probably need to just start that if I can. It's a short video of that solution. Should that maybe have that on autoplay? So this is just a web app. You just fill in the information. Don't bother about the details. All of these information fields are going to be tailored, configured to your needs. What kind of information do you request from your supplier? whether it be just the basic information or if you want to be able to collect more advanced information from the supplier. And of course, we have examples where you do actually look up of, is this a relevant supplier? There are some companies that actually have like an external tool for validating the supplier information. So you do a REST call to those, check the information of that supplier. Is that a valid supplier? Yes, get that information from that assessment center that has kind of information about credit rating, could be also about their business and what type of supplier it is. Once that is done, it turns into this kind of portal solution where the internal team, which is consisting of both the quality department, procurement department, manage the whole information set and validates that information. So you see that there are 3 suppliers that need to be validated. When you start the validation process, it opens up that information set for that supplier. See if I can start that up again. Stop somehow. Like that. And then it opens up a series of questions. It could be like a custom checklist that you need to be able to validate through that supplier. Asking questions about, is this a relevant supplier? Do you have other options for that supplier? Going through the different areas like, do they have the proper certificates to be able to supply you as an automotive customer? Do they have the proper, staff and quality certificates to be able to be a proper supplier? And once all the information is validated, it's sent off to an approval step. And then it's done. It's sent out to that new step, which could be a managerial position where they would approve that supplier. And that's such as a simple app like this that goes through this one like this. And this, using just the inbox functionality, it sends out notification you have a new supplier to approve. It pulls up that information with all the additional information that you need. And once you set approve, it runs a series of actions. It creates a supplier in the backend ERP. It sends out, and of course sets up a supplier portal if they have that. And then it sends out an email to that supplier. Yes, you're now a supplier of Novacura or another company. Welcome, here's the portal, gain access. Here are your RFQs or your POs to manage. Like that. So typical challenges with this is like you have a process that is not connected. Like you have bits and pieces. In the old days when I worked there was usually typically like a form you filled in and then it was circulated around quality department that filled in their parts. In the end, it went to finance and they had the nice opportunity just registering that supplier in the ERP. But then the process stops. And then you have all the other parts, which is part of a normal procurement process, is kind of supplier review. You need to be able to update the information. And this is where you can be able to manage and use this process to get that additional information using a supplier portal. Let's move forward. I want to talk more about this kind of e-tendering. This is more of a thing we worked on for the last 2 years. We have a couple of large customers using this supplier e-tendering template solution. It's usually for managing large-scale contracts. It could be that you want to expand a large business like a mine or a harbor. That is where you see this kind of typical process where you want to buy more complex things. It's based on our Flow portal, where you have the whole RFQ process or e-tendering process. It consists of multiple stages. So the whole tender process is divided by someone requesting something to be purchased, either from a contract or another area that needs to buy something that needs to specify that. That goes through an approval step where there are multiple parties taking place in actually assessing how is this tender set up. Legal could have their stakes. It could be engineering that want to put in their requirements to be able to manage this tender process. And it can also be other areas that need to put in their kind of commercial benefits, etc., into that process. The whole process then ends with that being published. So then it's sent out to a series of suppliers that can actually submit their tenders, their quotes, and that is then evaluated in the portal, so according to the criteria. And then it's a collaborative environment where you have all these kind of stakeholders evaluating the technical bid, the commercial bid, the legal requirements, etc., and all the kind of maybe certificates the supplier needs to have. And it's also managed in one solution, the Novacura Flow e-tender portal. What's the benefits of this one? Well, first of all, sorry if it was just a screenshot for that one. This is how you set up a tender. I'm not allowed to disclose the actual customer, this one. But you set up the tender details or tender dates. This is how you set up attachments, could be technical specifications, etc. In this one, but actually stored in the document management system. And this is how you just set up the evaluation criteria, which could be different for the commercials and the technical areas of this one. Now, once the tender is created, so we're just speeding up things, it's managed throughout the life cycle in our portal interface. The portal interface is where you have your teams collaborating about the tender, and you send out and can be able to look at this in a very nice user-friendly interface, which can be also configurable. Then, one of the strengths and why we say that this is probably better than like the normal kind of tender processes is that it's actually integrated. It's not just the procurement department doing this that has like a portal that sends out an RFQ. It's actually collaborating with departments taking place and actually adding and contributing to evaluating this tender process. So then it actually have custom tender portals for each department. I need to speed up a bit, so with that, I'll skip these couple of steps. First off, I talked about that having a collaborative environment is important. So there are specific portal pages for each department. So the procurement department will have their view of the tender process. The engineering department will have their view to evaluate the technical criteria. And also, of course, the other departments like managerial will have their view of the process to be able to kind of say that they have taken place in this process. So let's move over to supplier portals. Supplier portals is pretty much the same, but it's a bit more into the area of kind of normal procurement where you guys just go through a series of steps with an RFQ. Maybe you publish or send out the POs for confirmation. You have the supplier being able to deliver stuff and confirm the delivery, like normal communication between the procurement department and the supplier. So our supplier portal solution has a lot of various benefits that you can actually customize to say that these are things that I want to have in our supplier portal. It could be that you want to be able to kind of talk with them about RFQs, being able to send out a request for quotation to them to be managed in an easy way. It's not the same kind of e-tender, like a large-scale tender process, but it's more like an RFQ that you will be able to kind of respond to. Then being able to manage POs, confirming the delivery of POs in a simple way, whether that be in the portal interface or the web app. And then, of course, being able to manage deliveries and returns, and also communicate the KPIs and performance of that supplier. Being able to say, okay, your delivery performance this week is 99.2%. And, of course, being able to update your supplier's information. Sometimes you have outdated information about your suppliers. They haven't provided their latest updated certificate or their preferred delivery address or their own contact information. So you have that way of actually communicating with the suppliers. And in the end, also being able to manage the quality, updating certificates, etc. So just a brief example of the solution set, which is an RFQ process. There's a portal page where you see different RFQs that you can respond to. If you click on one, it starts the response process. And then from that, you can just click on that one, shows the lines that you're requesting up to the far right there. You click on that, you get the RFQ details. You can look at the lines you want to respond to. And a simple way just to respond by delivery date, price, lead time, conditions, warranties, etc. You can collect all that kind of information in the whole response back to you as a buyer. Like that. Let's see if we can just play through this one. And then you confirm as a supplier the bid to this RFQ, and then it moves over to you propose that bid. And then eventually you will, of course, say you communicate internal portal page where you evaluate the bids, and then you can communicate back to the supplier, say, yes, you won this bid, you are now the supplier for these parts or these services with this portal solution. See if I have time. Do I have more time, Lukas? I'm just checking the clock here.
You do.
Okay, cool. Because I have one more area that I want to talk about. It's the area connecting things inside the organization. It's the engineering change request process. Seems like boring stuff, but it's the heart of many manufacturing companies. Being able to manage the whole change of items, parts, revisions in an effective manner. Seems like a simple process where you will be able to just take one part, replace it with another, but in reality it's more complex than that. It takes a communication within your internal organization how to make that change. Engineering department needs to be aware of what's happening. Your manufacturing needs to be aware of what's happening. Do they need to provide new tooling? Do they need to update their manufacturing process? Do they need to update their instructions for manufacturing that new item? And of course, communicating this with the supplier. When is this change to happen? It's usually where you change out the part with a new part or update a revision. You need to be able to synchronize so you're not left with a large stock of surplus that you need to scrap out. Or if you have purchased things, with your suppliers that you have a lot of open POs, how do you manage that in an effective manner? So typically these processes are complex to manage. It involves a lot of communication between departments and also supplier and customers. So what we've done here is to set up an ECR, ECO process, being able then to collaborate around that with all the stakeholders such as, your internal team, your procurement, your manufacturing, your quality department, engineering, suppliers, and customers. And it carries for all of these steps where you have the request of that ECR, going through a series of steps where you do an impact analysis is usually where you assess how big this change is. It's a small change, maybe you don't need like the full-blown process, but if you're replacing more of a important part that is kind of have a big impact, that could actually affect both the price, quality, etc. out to the customer, then you need to assess it further. And then it goes through a series of steps of approval, implementation. Maybe you have also these kind of test runs to be able to produce sample parts for customers' approval. And you also need to maybe do the re-quote and the commercials with the customer just to be able to kind of get that cost in back from the customer. And then in the end, you talk about documentation closure. Usually these are very important, especially when you're in automotive or manufacturing environment where you have automotive customers. The full process is like this. There's 3 screens different from different types of requests. Could be an internal request. Could be usually the customer requesting a change because of their internal changes, of course. But it can also be the supplier that needs to request some kind of change. Supplier needs to change some material in their components that needs to be validated somehow. And then that flows through that request from an internal initial screening. There's a review process where you can actually communicate back to the supplier. There's an escalation, should something be, affecting your manufacturing quite, heavily. Or then it's like the plan where you start planning, assessing how much do I have in stock, where do I need to make that cut over, how do I manage like the POs open, etc. So all of these process steps is managed, and the nice part about this one is actually tightly integrated to the backend ERP, being able to collect that information from your ERP using both the product structure and the information about your procurement, stock at hand, etc. Typically, this kind of apps is like this, initiate request. Do like this, see if this button works. Oh, it didn't. So should probably not push that button. Do like this again. Skip that step and try the old-fashioned way like this. Should probably put this on auto. So typically, a customer can just start the process, fill in the requirements. Why do I need to make this change? Fill in some attachments. Maybe it could be documentations about that proposed change. Could be specifications, etc. And then they are put into a step where they can actually find their part to connect it to. This connects it directly to a part inside the backend system. And once that is done, that request is submitted. Not a very complex process, but in order for me to be able to use this with customer suppliers, it needs to be an easy process to manage. After that, there's a process to be able to, just a screenshot for easier access when you see the printout of these processes. There's a review process. This is where you talk about the screening of these items before it progresses further. Sometimes these things are not something you could actually directly do. It could be impossible to do. Could require investments in terms of machines, etc. Could be financially not viable. So this is where you would do the kind of screening. And the screening is taking place in a poly environment where you have these faces laid out in a nice way. And when you look at one of these items, you can look at all the documentations, the notes, the communication logs of that ECR. And when you open it up, you go through the kind of screening. Oh, it just follows screening. This is just a sample screening page that we developed for them, but it could be a custom template for each type of change they want to do. Material change could be different types of changes. And then, of course, like a more thorough screening where you ask questions, document the changes necessary in that solution. And once the whole change is accepted, we progress it further. It moves up to the details received, and then it moves further downstream the process. The whole is integrated in the ECR process. And then, of course, there's another additional information you can do. Change ownership. It's like an internal ticketing system. Yeah, this is a summary. I would say the biggest key takeaway from this one is that you would save a ton of money on this. It's surprising how much material company loses out because they do not manage this process effectively. We've talked to customers, large customers that manage this totally manually. You would be surprised how many companies that manage this manually. What happens then is that they are left with a lot of stock surplus that they need to scrap out, cost them millions and millions every year in lost revenue. So, with this said, I think that was it for this presentation. It was just a brief introduction to what we can do in the area of procurement, engineering, but there's other examples, and feel free just to reach out to me. I'll be in the expert booth area later. I'm by far not an expert in all the flow script modules, but if you want to talk different solutions, please talk to me. I probably have some interesting examples to show you. Thank you very much.